One rainy night in Chicago, 26-year-old Ariana Vale was shivering in the restroom of a laundromat, her lips cracked, her face bruised, and her hand clutching her phone, photographing every wound on her body. She texted someone she thought was her sister, 3 words. "I can't take it anymore." But she'd texted the wrong number, and the recipient wasn't her sister. It was Luca Moretti, Chicago's most notorious crime boss, the man the entire city feared at the mere mention of his name, and the only thing he texted back was, "Tell me his name." From that moment, Ariana Vale's life was never the same again. If you want to know what happens next, please like, subscribe, and comment the name of the city you're watching to let me know how far this story has progressed. Don't miss a second, because this is a story you won't be able to stop reading. The bathroom smelled like mildew and someone else's fabric softener. Ariana Vale sat on the edge of the toilet lid with her back against the tank, both knees pulled to her chest, and she breathed through her mouth because breathing through her nose hurt too much. The fluorescent light above the sink buzzed and flickered like it was deciding whether to stay on, and the mirror across from her showed a face she almost didn't recognize. Left cheekbone swollen high and dark, bottom lip split at the corner, dried blood gone rust-colored at the crease. A bruise starting low on her jaw that hadn't finished coming in yet, the kind that would look worse tomorrow, always worse tomorrow. Outside the thin bathroom door, the laundromat's machines ran their cycles. Drum tumbling, water cycling through hoses, the thick, warm smell of detergent pushing under the gap at the bottom. Someone out there was folding laundry at 11:30 on a Wednesday night and not thinking about anything except the crease in their shirts. Ariana thought about that. How ordinary it was. How far away. She'd walked 6 blocks in the rain to get here, hadn't taken her coat, hadn't taken anything except her phone and her keys, which she'd grabbed off the hook by the door with hands that were already shaking, and she'd walked fast without looking back at the apartment building until she'd turned the corner and couldn't see it anymore. The rain had soaked through her shirt in 2 minutes. She hadn't noticed until she stopped. She raised the phone now and looked at herself through the camera. Did it clinically, tapped the shutter button 4 times, cheek, jaw, lip, the underside of her left wrist where a handprint had bloomed red against her pale skin, his fingers distinct against hers. She didn't look away from the screen while she did it. If she looked away, she might start crying again, and she was done crying. She'd been crying for 2 hours before she left, and she had nothing left. She opened her messages and found her sister's name, Maya. Pulled up their thread. The last message was from 3 days ago, Maya sending a photo of a houseplant she'd bought, asking Ariana if she thought it needed more sunlight. A normal message from a normal life. Ariana stared at it for a moment. Then she attached the 4 photos and typed, "I can't do this anymore." She hit send before she could think about it. The bathroom light flickered. She watched the message sit there with its little delivered notification and tried to figure out what she wanted Maya to say back. "Come over. I'm coming to get you. Leave him." She'd heard all of those before, said yes to none of them, always gone back. She knew what Maya would think. She knew what Maya wouldn't say, but would be thinking, "Again, Ari? Again?" The reply came faster than she expected. "Who did this to you?" Ariana frowned at the screen. Something about the phrasing was wrong. Maya didn't talk like that. Maya would have said, "Oh my God," or "What happened?" or "Are you okay?" 3 separate messages, all arriving within 10 seconds of each other, exclamation points. This was 4 words, flat and direct. She looked at the top of the thread. The number. Looked at it again. It wasn't Maya's. The contact name at the top read Maya, but the number below it was wrong, off by 2 digits in the middle. She had Maya's number saved twice somehow, an old number from before Maya changed carriers, and she'd pulled up the wrong one without checking, and she'd sent 4 photographs of her own face to a stranger. She sat there for a moment with the kind of stillness that comes right after you realize something terrible. Her thumbs moved to type an apology, some form of wrong number. "Sorry, please delete." And then the next message came in. "Tell me his name." Ariana's breath caught. She stared at the message. The light buzzed overhead. Somewhere outside, a machine finished its cycle and clicked into silence. She should have put the phone face down and not responded. She knew that. She was aware of that in the same way she was aware of most things she should do and didn't. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Derek Sloan, she typed. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the two words, the flatness of them. Tell me his name. Not who is he. Not why did he do this. Not, are you safe? Just that. Like the name was the only relevant data point in the entire situation. She sent it and immediately felt sick. The response came in 4 seconds. He won't touch you again. Bolts. Ariana Vale had been with Derek Sloan for 2 years and 3 months. She'd met him at a reading event at the bookstore where she worked, Aldgate Books, a narrow 2-story shop on the north side that smelled like old paper and good coffee. Derek had come in for an author talk, ended up at the counter for 40 minutes asking her about a book he'd been meaning to read for years, the kind of conversation that doesn't happen in a bookstore unless both people let it happen. He was 31, broad-shouldered, worked in commercial real estate, had a laugh that filled a room. He'd asked for her number, and she'd given it to him, and that had felt like something. The first 8 months were good. She wasn't being nostalgic or stupid about it. They had actually been good. He was attentive in the way that felt like care and not surveillance. He remembered small things. He showed up to things that mattered to her. When her car broke down in January, he'd driven 40 minutes in a snowstorm to meet her. No complaint, just showed up. The first time he grabbed her arm too hard, they were in an argument about something she couldn't even remember now, and he'd caught himself immediately, let go, apologized so thoroughly that she'd felt guilty for the bruise she'd hidden under a long sleeve. She'd told herself it was the stress he was under at work. She'd believed that. The pattern after that was slow enough that she'd missed it building. Arguments that started small and ended somewhere she didn't expect. His hand around her wrist. His voice dropped low when they were in public and he was angry. The kind of quiet that was worse than shouting because it meant he was controlling himself, and the controlling itself was the threat. The first time he hit her, she'd stood in their bathroom afterward with her palm against her cheek and thought, in a completely detached way, the way you think about weather or a news headline, this is what it is now. She'd stayed because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. She'd stayed because she'd given up her apartment when they moved in together. She'd stayed because Derek knew her boss, knew her landlord's cousin, knew the kind of people in her life who could make things complicated if they chose to. She'd stayed because she was 26 and had $83 in savings, and a sister who lived 40 minutes away and who she'd already told, I'm fine. It's better twice too many times to be believed now. She sat in the laundromat bathroom and read the message again. He won't touch you again. She should have felt frightened. A stranger on the other end of a wrong number texting something like that in response to photos of her face should have made her frightened. Instead, she felt something she couldn't immediately name. Not comfort, something more complicated than comfort, like the first breath after a long time underwater. She typed, "Who are you?" The response took longer this time. She counted to 20. Someone who got your message by mistake. Go somewhere safe tonight. Don't go back to the apartment. I don't have anywhere to go. Then stay where you are. What's the address? She almost laughed. Almost. I'm not giving a stranger my address. Fair. Then, after a pause, is there a hotel nearby? A 24-hour diner? Anywhere you can stay until morning. She thought about her $83, thought about the Visa card in her wallet that Derek had added her to and could see the transactions on in real time. Not really, she typed. All right. Sit tight. Ariana looked at those 2 words for a long time. Then she put the phone face down on her knee and listened to the rain against the laundromat's single high window and tried to think about what she was going to do in the morning. She didn't think about it for very long before exhaustion dragged her under. She woke to a knock on the bathroom door. Not aggressive. 3 measured knocks, knuckles against hollow particle board. She startled upright, phone clattering to the tile, and for a split second she was back in the apartment and the sound was Derek's footsteps in the hallway and her body flooded with adrenaline before her brain caught up with where she was. Miss, a woman's voice, middle-aged, not unkind. We're closing up in 10 minutes. Ariana exhaled, looked at her phone. 1:14 a.m. She'd been asleep for an hour. She stood, ran cold water over her face without looking at the mirror, and unlocked the door. The woman outside was heavy-set, somewhere in her 50s, wearing a laundromat staff apron and a look that had seen enough late nights not to judge too hard. She glanced at Ariana's face, and her expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small tightening around the eyes. She didn't say anything about it. You need me to call someone? She asked instead. No, Ariana said. I'm fine. Thank you. Neither of them believed the second sentence. Ariana collected herself, zipped her phone into her jacket pocket, and walked out through the laundromat. The man folding laundry was gone. The machines were all stopped. The front windows were streaked with rain, and the street beyond them was empty and slick under the orange streetlights. She pushed through the door into the night. The rain had dropped to a fine mist, cold. She crossed her arms over her chest and stood on the sidewalk and tried to calculate the geography of her situation. She could call Maya. It was after 1 a.m, and Maya had a 4-year-old and a husband who worked early shifts, and Ariana had burned through the last of Maya's goodwill on this particular topic somewhere around month 14 of her and Derek. She could go back to the apartment. Derek would be asleep by now, probably. Or she could keep walking and figure out the morning when it came. She was still working through the options when a black sedan rolled to a stop at the curb 20 feet in front of her. Not threatening. It didn't gun the engine or cut across the sidewalk. It just stopped, lights on, wipers moving in slow time. After a moment, the passenger window lowered, and a man in his 50s with a square jaw and silver at his temples leaned across from the driver's seat. "Ms. Vale," he said. Her whole body went still. "I'm not going to ask you to get in the car," the man said. He had a flat Chicago accent and a voice calibrated to project calm in unstable situations. "I'm going to give you a hotel key and an address, and then I'm going to drive away. What you do with it is your choice." He held a key card out the window, white plastic with a hotel name printed on the side, room number written in pen on the paper sleeve. Ariana stood there in the mist and looked at it. "Who sent you?" she asked. "A man who got a message that wasn't meant for him," the driver said. "The room's covered through Sunday. There's food in the minibar. Nobody knows where you are." She looked at the key card. She looked at the empty street. She thought about the $83 and the Visa card Derek could track, and the apartment 2 miles north where he was sleeping in the bed they shared. She walked forward and took the key. The sedan pulled away without another word. The hotel was 4 blocks east, a mid-sized business place, lobby warm and anonymous, the kind of hotel where nobody looked at you twice because everyone was passing through. The room was on the 8th floor, a corner unit, clean and dark and quiet in a way that felt like privacy instead of emptiness. She double-locked the door and sat down on the edge of the bed and finally looked at her phone. She had 2 new messages from the unknown number. The first, "The room is under a name that doesn't connect to you. Don't use the minibar's credit option. There's cash in the nightstand drawer, left side." The second, "Get some sleep. We can talk tomorrow if you want. If you don't have to." She opened the nightstand drawer. $300 in 20s, folded once. She sat with the money in her hand for a long time. Then she typed, "Who are you?" This time the answer came back in under a minute. "My name is Luca Moretti. You'll probably want to look that up. I'd rather you do it now than find out some other way." She looked it up. The results loaded, and she read the first 3 paragraphs of a Chicago Tribune piece from 2 years ago, a federal investigation piece, a profile buried under newer news. She read the words organized crime and alleged and acquitted and untouchable, and she sat in the dark hotel room with her split lip and her bruised face and $300 in cash and thought about the kind of night that ends with you making a decision like this. Then she typed, "Why are you doing this?" The response took 4 minutes. "I had a sister. Someone hurt her, and I wasn't there." "That's it?" "That's enough." She stared at the message until the screen dimmed. She plugged her phone into the charger on the nightstand, lay back on the bed with her shoes still on, stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought about Derek waking up to an empty apartment. Thought about what his face did when he was angry and trying to hide it, that specific tightening around the mouth, the way he went very still before he moved. Thought about what he would do when he realized she wasn't coming back. Her phone buzzed. Not from Luca, from Derek. "Where are you?" Not a question. The period at the end like a period on a sentence, not a breath of inquiry, but a declaration. She watched it glow on the screen. Then another one. "Ariana. Answer me." Then, "I swear to God, if you don't answer this phone in 5 minutes, you're going to regret it." She turned the phone face down, put both hands flat on the bedspread, breathed. She'd gotten this kind of message before, 14 of them in a row, once escalating from calm to cold to something that scared her into calling back within 20 minutes just to stop the sequence. She'd always called back. She'd never not called back. She picked up the phone, turned it face up, and watched Derek's name light the screen with another message. She put it down again. Didn't answer. She lay in the dark with her heart banging against her ribs and her lip throbbing, and the sounds of a city indifferent to her specific crisis moving 8 floors below, and she thought, not for the first time, but for the first time with the hotel key card on the nightstand and Luca Moretti's number in her phone, that maybe this time she wasn't going back. She didn't sleep for a long time. When she finally did, she dreamed about the bookstore, about the way the afternoon light came through the front windows and hit the spines of the books on the east wall and turned them amber, about the specific quiet of a place where people came to be somewhere else entirely, to disappear into other people's lives on purpose. She hadn't dreamed about it in months. The morning came gray and cold through the blackout curtains. She hadn't quite closed all the way. She sat up with her whole face aching and checked her phone. Derek had sent 11 more messages between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., the last one reading, "You think this is over? I will find you." Then nothing. A silence that felt like him deciding on something. She got up, washed her face carefully, ate 2 of the granola bars from the minibar standing at the window, looking out at the street below. The city was up and moving. Delivery trucks, a school bus, pigeons organized on a ledge across the way. Everything ordinary. Her phone rang at 8:12 a.m. Unknown number. Not Derek's. A different one. She answered. "Ms. Vale." A woman's voice. Professional. "My name isn't important right now. I'm calling on behalf of Luca Moretti. He'd like to know if you're all right, and he wants you to know that if you're interested in meeting this afternoon, he's available. If you'd rather not, he understands, and the room stays available until Sunday regardless." Ariana looked at her face in the bathroom mirror across the room. The cheekbone was worse than last night. The bruise had finished coming in, deep purple-green at the center. "Tell him I'll meet him," she said. A pause. "All right. A car will come at 2. You don't have to get in." "I know," Ariana said. She hung up and stood at the window with her granola bar and watched the city move. And somewhere across town, Derek Sloan was waking up to find that his business partner's phone was going to voicemail, and his calendar was suddenly, inexplicably empty, and a story he hadn't heard yet was already being written about him in places he'd never think to look. She didn't know that yet. But she would. The car came at 2 o'clock exactly. Same black sedan as the night before, same driver with the silver temples and the square jaw, idling at the curb in front of the hotel with the kind of patience that said he'd been doing this long enough that waiting wasn't something he thought about anymore. Ariana stood at the lobby window for a full minute watching it before she pushed through the revolving door. The driver didn't get out, didn't wave, just watched her approach in the side mirror with the engine running. She stopped at the passenger door and looked in through the glass. He looked back. "You don't have to get in," he said through the cracked window. Same line as the morning call. She was starting to understand it was a policy, not courtesy. "I know," she said, and got in the back. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly chemical, hand sanitizer maybe, or the kind of cleaning product used on surfaces that needed to be reliably clean. The seat was warm, climate control running. She buckled her seatbelt out of habit and immediately felt stupid about it, then decided she didn't care and left it buckled. The driver pulled into traffic without asking where she wanted to go. She watched the city scroll past the window. North side giving way to the river district. The architecture changing, buildings getting older and more deliberate. She'd lived in Chicago her whole life and still found herself surprised by how fast the neighborhood shifted, how a single block could feel like a border crossing. "What's your name?" she asked. "Carver," the driver said. "Is that your first name or your last?" "Depends on the day." She didn't push it, watched the window. Her phone had been silent since the 4 a.m. message from Derek, and that silence bothered her more than the messages had. Derek's silences were always strategic. They meant he'd stopped reacting and started calculating. The car stopped in front of a restaurant on the west side of the river, a narrow, understated place with no sign above the door, just a number in brass. The kind of restaurant that didn't need a sign because everyone who needed to know already knew. Carver put the car in park. "Straight in," he said. "Table in the back. He's already there." "Great," Ariana said, and meant it less than the word implied. She got out. The interior was dim and warm. 3 tables occupied in the front section, a bar running the length of the left wall with nobody behind it. A hostess in a black dress materialized immediately and guided her through without being asked her name, which meant Luca Moretti had given them a description and not a name, which told her something about how he operated. The back room was separated by a half wall of frosted glass. 1 table, 2 chairs. A man sitting in the far chair who stood when she came in, which she hadn't expected. Luca Moretti was 53 years old. She knew that from the article she'd read the night before. In the photographs attached to the article, he'd looked severe, jaw set, the kind of face designed to give nothing away in a crowd. In person, he was not softer exactly, but more dimensional. Thick dark hair gone silver at the temples like Carver's. But whereas Carver looked like a man who'd aged from exposure, Luca looked like a man who'd made decisions and carried them. He was in a dark gray jacket over a simple shirt, no tie. He waited until she sat before he sat, which was either old-fashioned courtesy or a tactical choice to let her settle first. She didn't know him well enough to know which. "You look worse than the photos," he said. "Good morning to you too," she said. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "How's the room?" "Fine. Good." She put her hands in her lap. "I don't know why I'm here." "Because you got in the car." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." He poured water from a carafe on the table, pushed the glass toward her. She took it because her throat was dry and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. "I want to know what you're planning to do." "I was going to ask you the same question," she said. He looked at her steadily. He had the kind of eyes that didn't wander. Not intense in a dramatic sense, just focused, like the rest of his face was neutral and his eyes were doing all the actual work. "I've already done some things," he said. "What kind of things?" "The kind that make a man's morning inconvenient." He picked up his own glass. His primary business account was flagged for a routine audit. His largest client received an anonymous package, documents, contractual discrepancies going back 4 years. The kind of thing that ends partnerships. Ariana set her glass down. "You did that last night?" "I made calls last night." "That's..." She stopped, started again. "You don't know anything about Derek. You don't know if he deserved..." "I saw 4 photographs," Luca said. "I don't need a biography." The flatness of it hit her somewhere she wasn't expecting. She looked down at the table. The wood grain, a small scratch near the edge. "I can't accept help from you," she said. "You already did." "I mean more help." "Why?" She looked up. "Because I read about you. I know what you are." "Then you know I'm effective," he said. "I know you're dangerous. To people who should be afraid of me." He set his glass down. "You're not one of them. You don't know that." "No," he said. "I don't. But I know what a wrong number text looks like, and I know what it doesn't look like, and what you sent me wasn't calculated." He held her gaze. "You were hiding in a bathroom. You thought you were talking to your sister." The accuracy of it made her jaw tighten. "I want Derek left alone," she said. "That's not something I can promise." "Then what are we doing here?" "Talking," he said, which is what people do when they don't know what happens next. A waiter appeared. Luca ordered coffee. She ordered the same because she needed something to do with her hands. The waiter disappeared and they sat in the quiet of the back room, and she looked at this man who had dismantled a piece of Derek's life before breakfast and felt the specific vertigo of being completely outside a situation she'd thought she understood. "My sister's name was Elena," Luca said. He wasn't looking at her when he said it, looking at the table, but not at the scratch, past it, through it, at something years behind it. "She was 24, the man she was with..." He stopped, pressed his mouth together for a moment. "I had resources even then. I had people. I could have done something. I knew something was wrong and I waited because she asked me to, because she said it would make it worse, Because I believed her when she said she had it handled. He looked up. She didn't have it handled. The coffee arrived. Neither of them touched it immediately. I'm not your sister, Ariana said, carefully, not unkindly. No, he said. You're not. I don't need you to fix something because you failed someone else. That's fair. He picked up his coffee. But what I'm offering isn't about Elena. It started there. It's not there anymore. She studied his face for a tell and didn't find one. What does protection look like? She asked. Invisible, he said. That's the whole point. She didn't go back to the apartment that day, or the next. On Thursday morning, she called in sick to Aldgate Books and lay in the hotel room watching the ceiling and texting Maya in careful, vague sentences. I need a few days. I'm okay. I'll explain later. Maya responded with a wall of questions she didn't answer. She thought about Derek's 4 a.m. silence and checked his social media in a moment of weakness, found nothing new, put the phone down. On Thursday afternoon, Carver appeared in the hotel lobby with a bag of her clothes. She stood in front of him in the elevator lobby and stared at the bag. How did you get into my apartment? She asked. You'd left your keys in your jacket pocket. The jacket was at the hotel. He held the bag out. We didn't go through anything we didn't have to. That's completely illegal. Yes, Carver said, without apology or elaboration. She took the bag. Inside were 3 changes of clothes, her toiletries, a paperback from her nightstand, and her spare phone charger. Whoever had packed it had done it with a kind of efficiency that suggested they'd been briefed. Nothing frivolous, nothing missing. Tell him thank you, she said. Tell him yourself, Carver said, and went back to the elevator. She stood in the hallway holding the bag and felt the ground shifting in a way that had nothing to do with the building. Derek Sloan spent Thursday in a state of escalating controlled fury. He'd waited until noon to call her phone again. When she didn't pick up, he'd called her work, and someone at Aldgate Books had told him she'd called in sick. He'd driven to the apartment and walked through every room twice, as if she might be hiding somewhere in the 3-bedroom unit. She wasn't. Her coat was still on the hook. Her car was in the parking garage. She'd left with nothing. He stood in the kitchen and worked through the timeline. She'd left sometime between 10 p.m., when he'd gone to bed, and 1 a.m., when the messages he'd sent started going unread. She'd walked somewhere, which meant somewhere close. She didn't have cash. Her card was linked to his account. He pulled up the account. No transactions since Tuesday. He called 2 of her friends, left neutral-sounding voicemails, checked her Instagram, private, nothing new posted. His business partner Ryan had called 3 times that morning and left a message about some document issue with the Hargrove account that Derek hadn't called back about because Ryan's problems were going to have to wait. His lawyer called at 3 p.m. Derek. Mitch Farrow had a careful voice. Careful in the way of someone who charged $400 an hour and didn't want to give anything away for free. I need you to come in. Can we do this on the phone? I'd rather we didn't. He went in at 4. Mitch's office on Michigan Avenue, 22nd floor. The view, the thing you paid for when you hired Mitch. The lawyer had his jacket off and his reading glasses still on when Derek came in, which meant he'd been working the problem for a while before making the call. There's an anonymous complaint filed with the State Financial Oversight Board, Mitch said. Detailed, specific. It names 3 accounts and 2 business relationships by name and includes documents, actual documents, not summaries, that I don't know how whoever filed this would have. Derek sat in the chair across the desk and kept his face level. What kind of documents? The kind that require explanation. Mitch took off his glasses. This isn't a fishing expedition. Whoever put this together knew what they were looking for before they looked. Can you make it go away? I can slow it down. I can create complications. He folded his glasses. But Derek, if these documents are what they appear to be, we have a more fundamental problem. Derek drove home and sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. He thought about Ariana, about the text she'd sent him once, early on, something sweet that he'd screenshotted and still had somewhere, the version of her that had trusted him easily. He thought about her face when she made herself go quiet and compliant, because she'd learned what happened when she wasn't. He thought about how she'd looked at him last night before he'd hit her. The specific expression, the exhaustion, and something else beneath it, something that had started to look like a decision forming. He thought about who could have gotten those financial documents. He went upstairs and poured himself a drink and started making calls. Ariana met Luca for the second time on Friday evening. Not a restaurant this time. A building on the near west side, mid-century architecture. A lobby with a security desk and a man behind it who nodded at Luca without being asked. An elevator to the 14th floor, a corner office with the city spread out below, the river catching the last of the evening light. She sat. He stood at the window for a moment before turning. "He's been asking questions," Luca said. "About me?" "About who might have interfered with his business. He's not making the connection yet." He moved to the chair across from her. "He will." "How long?" "Day. Maybe 2. She pressed her hands flat on her knees. "What happens when he figures it out?" "Then we have a different conversation than the one we're having now." "That's not an answer. It's an honest one." He studied her. "You said you don't want him hurt." "I don't." "That limits the options." "I know that." "So what do you want?" He said it without pressure. A genuine question, which was somehow more unsettling than a leading one. Not what you're willing to accept. What do you actually want? She looked at her hands. "I want it to be over," she said. "I want him to leave me alone, and I want—" She stopped. The room was very quiet. "I want to not be afraid every time my phone lights up." "Okay." "Okay?" She looked up. "That's it?" "I'm not going to tell you it's simple," he said, "but it's achievable. Men like Derek Sloan have more vulnerabilities than they understand. The financial investigation gives us something to work with. If there's a real case to be made, if there's a case, it should go to the police, not to you." He tilted his head slightly. "Those aren't mutually exclusive. In your world, they generally are." "My world is different than it was," he said. She looked at him. "The article said you were acquitted on all counts." "I was." "It also said the prosecution believed the jury was compromised." "It did say that." "Were they?" The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. He didn't insult her by filling it with a denial, which she found she respected more than she wanted to. "I'm trying to be something different now," he said. "People say that," she said. "I know." He held her gaze. "I'm also doing it, which is less common." She stood up, walked to the window. The city below was running its Friday evening, lights coming on in the buildings across the river, a boat pushing a slow wake downstream. She thought about Derek in his apartment right now, making his calls, working his angles, the version of him that had a lawyer and business partners and a parking space with his name on it and a handprint on her wrist that was still fading. "He has access to my work email," she said. "He installed something on my laptop. I noticed it 6 months ago, some kind of monitoring software. I never confronted him about it." Luca was quiet for a moment. "Is the laptop at the apartment?" "Yes." "All right." "Luca." She turned from the window. Using his name for the first time, he noticed, she saw that he noticed, and waited. "If I do this, if I let you help with this, I need you to tell me what you get out of it." He was quiet for long enough that she knew he was considering his actual answer rather than a comfortable one. "I get to be someone who was there," he said, "when it mattered." She looked at him for a moment, then she nodded once and turned back to the window. "The laptop," she said. "How fast can you get to it?" "Carver can be there in 20 minutes. There's a spare key under the potted plant on the 3rd floor landing. Don't ask me why, I know it's obvious. I was 24 when I moved in." She paused. "Derek doesn't know about it." 20 minutes, Luca said, and reached for his phone. What happened over the next 36 hours moved faster than she was prepared for. The laptop disappeared from the apartment and reappeared in pieces of information. Luca's people found not just the monitoring software, but a cache of Derek's own files backed up to the same machine, a mirroring function he'd set up that he probably thought was clever. Business communications, financial records, Enough to make Mitch Farrow's carefully worded concerns look like understatement. She didn't ask how they accessed it. She was aware that she was not asking how they accessed it as a deliberate choice, and she sat with that. On Saturday afternoon, she called Maya. "Where are you?" Maya said before hello. "I'm safe. I'm in a hotel." "Are you? Ari, what's going on?" "Derek called me." She felt her jaw tighten. "What did he say?" "He said you were going through something and he was worried. He said it like..." Maya's voice shifted. "He said it like he was the concerned boyfriend and I'm supposed to call him when I hear from you." "Don't call him." "I'm not going to call him. Ari, talk to me." She looked at the hotel room. The view she'd memorized over 4 days, the same slice of city from the same window. She thought about how to explain it. Where to begin? How to account for the specific sequence of events that had put her here. "I left him," she said. A pause. "Okay. It's going to be complicated." "I know. More complicated than you're imagining." "Tell me." She didn't tell her all of it. She told her enough. The night at the laundromat, the hotel, the investigation opening up around Derek's finances. She didn't mention Luca's name. She didn't say wrong number because she didn't know how to explain what came after it. Maya listened. When Ariana stopped talking, Maya said, "Who's helping you?" "Someone I met." "Someone you..." A breath. "Ari." "It's not like that." "Okay." "It's not." "I said okay." Maya's voice was careful now. The careful of someone who had opinions she'd decided to save. "Do you need me to come?" "Not yet. Maybe soon." "I'm here the second you need me. You know that." "I know," Ariana said. She hung up and sat on the bed and checked her phone and found a message from Derek. Not angry this time. That was the thing about Derek at his most dangerous. He stopped being angry. The messages that scared her most were always the ones that came after the anger, when he'd had time to decide something. "I know something's going on. I think you should come home and we should talk about it like adults. I'm not mad. I just want to understand what you're going through. Come home, Ari." She read it 3 times, then she forwarded it to Luca with no context. He replied in 2 minutes. "Don't respond. And don't go anywhere alone today." She typed, "Why?" His response came immediately, and it was the first message from him that had anything close to urgency in it. "Because 20 minutes ago, Derek Sloan made a call to a man I recognize. And the man he called doesn't do conversations. He does locations." She sat very still on the edge of the hotel bed. "He's looking for me," she typed. "He's past looking," Luca wrote back. He's already hired someone to find." The message cut off there. Ariana stared at the unfinished sentence on her screen. The cursor had stopped blinking. Nothing came after it. She typed Luca and waited. Typed it again. The read receipt appeared. He'd seen it. But no response came. And the silence on the other end of that thread was a different quality of silence than she'd experienced from him before. His silences had always felt deliberate, contained. This one felt interrupted. She stood up from the bed and went to the window without knowing why. The street below was ordinary. A woman walking a dog. A delivery guy on a bicycle threading through a gap in traffic. Nothing that looked like anything. Her phone rang. Carver. "Don't use the elevator," he said. "Take the stairs to the 2nd floor and wait in the stairwell. Don't open any exterior doors." "What's happening?" "2 minutes, Ms. Vale." He hung up. She grabbed her jacket off the chair, her phone, the $300 from the nightstand drawer out of habit, some survival instinct that knew cash mattered more than anything else she owned right now. And she was out the door and into the hallway before she'd consciously decided to move. The stairwell smelled like concrete and old carpet. She went down 1 flight and stopped on the landing between 8 and 7, back against the wall, and listened to the building breathe. Elevator hum. Someone's television through a fire door. The distant sound of the street. The stairwell door above her opened. She pressed back. Then Carver's face appeared over the railing, looking down, and she exhaled. He came down to her landing. His jacket was open in a way it hadn't been before, and she understood without wanting to understand what that meant about what he was prepared for. "We're going out through the kitchen exit," he said quietly. "Stay close. Don't stop for anything." "Tell me what happened." "Later." Now, she said. Carver. Now. He looked at her for a moment. A man recalculating. The man Derek called put a locate on your phone carrier account. He had your number from Derek. He's been triangulating since this morning. He moved toward the stairs going down. Someone should have caught that sooner. Where's Luca? Handling something. That's not Ms. Vale. He stopped on the step below her and turned, and his face was steady in a way that took effort. We have about 4 minutes before someone walks through the front lobby who shouldn't be here. I need you moving. She moved. Oh. The car was in the alley behind the hotel, running. A different car than the sedan. A gray SUV with tinted rear windows. Carver put her in the back and got behind the wheel, and they were moving before she'd finished closing the door, turning out of the alley and into traffic with the kind of unhurried speed that didn't draw attention. She watched the hotel disappear in the rear window. 4 days. She'd had 4 days of something that felt like breathing room, and now she was in the back of another car going somewhere she hadn't chosen, watching the city rearrange itself outside the glass. Her phone buzzed. Luca. Are you with Carver? Yes. Good. I'm 20 minutes out. There's a location. I'll send it. Don't talk to anyone until I get there. What happened back there? A pause. Longer than usual. We had a leak. She read it twice. What do you mean a leak? Someone in my organization told Derek's man which hotel you were in. We're sorting it out. She sat with that. Watched the river appear between buildings as they crossed north. A leak. Someone inside Luca's operation had given Derek's hired tracker her location, which meant that the invisible protection she'd been promised had a hole in it that had been there the entire time, and she hadn't known. And she'd slept 4 nights in that hotel room thinking she was safe while someone with access to that information had been deciding what to do with it. She thought about all the things she'd said in that hotel room, on the phone with Maya, the texts she'd sent, the conversations she'd had. Who? She typed. Not your concern right now. It absolutely is my concern. Another pause. A man named Garrett. He's been with me 6 years. He won't be a problem going forward. She didn't ask what won't be a problem going forward meant. She found she didn't want to know, which told her something about how much ground she'd already ceded in the past 4 days without noticing. She put the phone face down on her knee and looked out the window and thought about the moment in the hotel room when she'd decided to trust this. The $300 in the nightstand, the hotel key card, the granola bar from the minibar, and the city moving normal 8 floors below. She'd let herself believe that someone else's infrastructure could hold her weight. She'd forgotten that infrastructure belongs to whoever built it, and whoever built it has their own interests, and interests shift. She picked the phone back up. I need you to tell me everything, she typed. Not the version you think I can handle. Everything. The location was a building she didn't recognize, a converted industrial space on the near southwest side. Brick exterior, reinforced windows. The kind of place that had stopped being whatever it originally was and become something else gradually enough that nobody had marked the transition. Carver pulled into an underground parking structure, and they took a private elevator up 3 floors. The space they emerged into was large and deliberately sparse. Exposed beams, good lighting, a conference table that had seen real use. 3 men she'd never seen before stood near the far wall, talking in low voices that stopped when she came in. She registered all of it and then registered Luca standing at the head of the table, jacket off, phone in his hand. He looked up. There was something different about him. She'd seen him controlled, deliberate, every word selected. Right now he was controlled, but it was the control of someone containing something that had been disturbed. His eyes found her, moved over her quickly, checking for damage, and then settled. Sit down, he said. Tell me about Garrett first. Ariana? You said trust you. You said invisible. You said nobody would know where I was. She stood at the edge of the table and didn't move toward the chair. Someone knew. Yes? Your person. Yes. He set his phone down. Garrett was feeding information to a man named Voss. Voss worked for several people in this city with competing interests. Derek Sloan is a small client. Derek had money and a specific problem, and Voss had a source inside my organization, and the source didn't understand the full context of what he was selling. The full context, she repeated. You mean he didn't know who I was to you? Luca was quiet for a moment. He knew you were someone I was protecting. He thought that was the extent of it. And what's the extent of it? The room was very still. The three men near the wall had gone preternaturally quiet in the way of people trained to become furniture when required. Sit down, Luca said. Differently this time. Not an instruction. Something closer to a request. She sat. He pulled the chair across from her and sat too, forearms on the table, and she noticed for the first time that his knuckles on his right hand were abraded. Fresh. She looked at them and then looked at his face and didn't ask. Garrett has been with me since I was building the legitimate side, he said. I trusted him with transition logistics, moving money out of old operations into clean ones. He knew the architecture of the organization better than almost anyone. He paused. What I didn't know was that he'd been supplementing his income for the past 18 months. Small things at first. Information that seemed harmless, schedules, meeting locations. He'd made himself believe it didn't matter. Until it did, Ariana said. Until you. She held his gaze. Where is he now? He's been removed. Luca. He's alive, Ariana. He's been removed from the organization, and he's been persuaded that cooperation with anyone connected to this situation would be a serious mistake. He said it without embellishment. That's the truth. She exhaled, slowly. Does Derek know where I am now? No. Voss lost the signal when Carver moved you. They know you were at the hotel, and they know you left. They don't have a new location. How long before they find a new one? Luca's jaw tightened, just slightly. Voss is good. A day. Maybe less. Then we're back where we started. Not exactly. He reached across the table and turned his phone to face her. A document on the screen. She recognized the format vaguely. Federal letterhead. The financial investigation into Derek Sloan has moved faster than anticipated. The documents from the laptop, the ones our people pulled, were transferred anonymously to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit yesterday morning. She stared at the screen. The case was already developing from the state-level complaint, Luca said. The laptop documents accelerated it significantly. They issued a preliminary warrant this morning. That's, she looked up. That's good. That's what we wanted. It's good, he said. It's also what made Derek move faster than I expected. He took the phone back. A man who knows a warrant is coming behaves differently than a man who thinks he still has time. He's not trying to wait you out anymore. He's trying to clean up. The phrasing landed on her like something cold. Clean up, she said. You're the only person who can testify to the physical abuse, the only one with first-hand evidence of his pattern of behavior. Without you, the criminal case is financial only, serious, but survivable for a man with Mitch Farrow as his lawyer. Luca held her gaze and didn't soften what came next. You're not someone he needs to threaten anymore. You're someone he needs to silence. The room was quiet enough that she could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. She'd known this. Somewhere in the back of her mind, in the place where she stored the things she couldn't afford to fully process, she'd known this since the moment she read his message. Come home, Ari. And felt how wrong it was. The temperature of it. The practiced calm of a man who had already decided something. She pressed her palms flat on the table surface, felt the solidity of it. What do I do? She said. We need to move you again tonight, somewhere Voss can't trace. I have a property That's not what I mean. She looked at him. You said the criminal case needs me, my testimony, my evidence. She paused. What does that look like? Luca studied her. You'd need to make a formal statement to federal investigators. Provide documentation, the photos, the medical records if you have them, any communications that establish the pattern. And then what? I go into some kind of protective custody? The FBI has options. I'm asking you. He sat back slightly. Then yes, federal protection until the case proceeds. And if Derek gets to me before that, the silence lasted 3 full seconds. He won't, Luca said. You said I was invisible, she said. You said nobody would know where I was. Garrett made you wrong about that. She held his gaze and made herself keep holding it. What makes you right about this? It was the most direct thing she'd said to him. She watched it land. Watched something move behind his eyes. Not defensiveness, something more honest than that. The look of a man confronting the gap between what he'd promised and what he'd delivered. Nothing, he said. Nothing makes me certain. I can tell you what I'm willing to do to make sure it doesn't happen, but I can't promise you certainty. I couldn't before, and I should have said that more clearly. She nodded. Once. Not forgiveness, acknowledgement. There's something else, he said. The way he said it made her go still. He picked up his phone again, opened something, turned it to face her. It was a photograph. Security camera quality, slightly grainy, timestamp in the corner from earlier that afternoon. A parking structure, not this one. A man she didn't recognize standing beside a car, talking to someone whose back was to the camera. The someone whose back was to the camera was wearing Maya's green coat, the one with the brass buttons, the one Maya had bought at the vintage market on Milwaukee Avenue 2 winters ago and had never thrown out because she said it made her look like she had intentions. Ariana's breath stopped. That's my sister, she said. Yes. Who is the man she's talking to? Voss. The word fell into the room like something dropped from a height. She looked at the timestamp. 2:47 p.m. She'd talked to Maya at noon. I'm here the second you need me. You know that. 2 hours and 47 minutes later, Maya was in a parking structure talking to the man Derek had hired to find her. How? Ariana said. The word came out wrong. Too flat. No interrogative lift at the end. Not a question so much as a sound her mouth made because it needed to make something. Derek called her, Luca said. We intercepted the call log. He reached out to her Thursday morning before you called her on Saturday. He had 2 days to work on her before you made contact. What did he tell her? Luca set the phone down. That you were involved with a dangerous man. That the man had manipulated you into a situation you didn't understand. That he was afraid for your safety. He paused. He wasn't entirely wrong about the facts. He just had the roles reversed. Ariana sat with her hands in her lap and felt the specific quality of betrayal that only comes from people who love you. Not malice. Maya hadn't done this out of malice. She'd done it out of a version of caring that Derek had gotten to first and shaped into something useful for him. She'd done it because she'd heard dangerous man and my sister and made the calculation that made sense with the information she had. And Ariana had told Maya she was safe, had said, I'll explain later, instead of explaining, had protected the secret of Luca's name as if the name was the dangerous part, and in doing so had left Maya with only Derek's version of events to work with. Her eyes burned. She didn't let them do anything about it. Does Voss know where I am now? She asked. No, Maya doesn't know where you are. She only knew the hotel, which Voss already had. Does she know she stopped, restructured. Does she know what she did? I don't believe so. I think she thought she was helping locate you to make sure you were safe. Ariana nodded, pressed her lips together, felt something in her chest that was grief and fury in proportions she couldn't yet separate. I need to call her, she said. Not yet. Luca. Not yet. His voice wasn't hard. It was careful in a way that meant the hardness was behind it, contained. If you call her now and Derek is monitoring her phone, which he is, we lose whatever window we have left. She knew he was right. She knew it in the same way she'd known to get in the car, to leave the hotel, to take the cash from the nightstand. The part of her that processed threat had been recalibrating continuously for 4 days, and it knew when to listen. But the part of her that was Maya's younger sister by 4 years, who had called her at noon and heard, I'm here the second you need me, and believed it. She stood up, walked to the window. The southwest side spread out below, industrial and residential tangled together, the city unconcerned with her specific catastrophe. What are our options, she said. Not a question anymore, something operational. Luca came to stand beside her. Not close, a respectful distance. She was aware of it anyway. Option 1, he said. We move you tonight. New location, completely clean. We feed Voss a false signal. Put your phone somewhere decoyable. That buys us 48 hours, maybe. We use that time to get you in front of the federal investigators formally. You make your statement. The case accelerates past the point where silencing you changes the outcome. And Maya? We warn her, not tonight, tomorrow, when it doesn't risk your position. She's going to know she made a mistake. Yes, he said. She will. Option 2, Ariana said. Luca was quiet for a moment. Option 2 is that we do nothing tonight. We let Voss find the signal. We let Derek believe he knows where you are. He turned from the window to look at her. And we're there when he comes. The implication of we're there when he comes settled over her like weather. You mean use me as bait, she said. I mean use the situation we're already in. That's the same thing. It's faster, he said. And it ends with Derek in a position where the federal case becomes secondary to the immediate criminal charges. And it ends with me in a room with a man who just hired someone to silence me. Not alone, Luca said. She turned from the window and looked at him fully. This man she had not known existed 6 days ago, whose name she'd looked up on a hotel bed with a split lip and $300 in cash, who had a dead sister and a braided knuckles and a man named Garrett, who had been removed from an organization that was trying to be something different than what it was. If I go to the FBI, she said, if I walk in and make a statement and give them everything, the photos, the communications, the laptop data, all of it, what happens to you? Something shifted in his expression. What do you mean? The laptop data, the financial documents that got transferred anonymously, the way all of that was obtained. She held his gaze. I'm not naive, Luca. If I sit down with federal investigators and tell them my story includes the last 6 days, and the last 6 days includes you. He was quiet for a long moment. That's my concern, he said. Not yours. It's both of ours now. She looked at him steadily. Whether you like it or not. He looked back at her. Something that had been held at a careful managed distance in his expression moved closer to the surface. Not sentiment, something more structural than that. Recognition, maybe. Of the specific quality of someone who refused to let you take damage on their behalf without accounting for it. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. Whatever he saw there made the line of his jaw change. He picked it up. Ariana watched his face as he read. Watched the controlled stillness become something else. Not panic, men like Luca Moretti did not panic, but the look of a man absorbing information that reconfigured everything he'd just said. He set the phone down. What? She said. Derek's not waiting for Voss to find you, Luca said. His voice was level, and that levelness cost him something. He's already moved. Moved how? He turned the phone to face her. A text from a number she didn't recognize sent to Luca's line 40 seconds ago, 3 words and a photo. The 3 words, he has her. The photo was dark, taken from distance, low resolution in the way of a security camera or a phone on maximum zoom from across a street. But the image was clear enough. A parking structure, a green coat with brass buttons. A man with his hand on the arm of a woman whose face was turned away from the camera, but whose posture, the set of her shoulders, the particular way she held her head when she was frightened, was something Ariana had known her entire life. Maya. Derek had Maya. Ariana's chair scraped back before she knew she was standing. The room came back into focus. The 3 men near the wall already moving, Carver straightening from where he'd been leaning against the far wall, Luca on his feet with his phone already at his ear. Sit down, he said to her, and his voice had changed into something that had no warmth in it at all, the voice of someone shifting registers into a place where warmth was irrelevant. I need you to sit down and not move until I tell you to. That's my sister, she said. I know. Luca, I know. He held her gaze for 1 second, 2. Long enough that she understood he was not dismissing the weight of it. And I need 30 seconds to make a call. Give me 30 seconds. She stood there with her hands at her sides and her heart doing something violent in her chest and the photograph still glowing on the phone screen on the table in front of her. And she looked at her sister's green coat with the brass buttons and thought about the specific sound of Maya's voice when she'd said, "I'm here the second you need me," and how she'd meant it, how she had absolutely meant every word of it, and how Derek Sloan had found a way to turn that into a... The word didn't finish forming in her mind before Luca was already moving. He had the phone at his ear and his jacket off the chair in the same motion, crossing the room toward the three men near the wall with the focused efficiency of someone whose body had trained itself to stop processing shock and start processing action a long time ago. She heard him say two words into the phone, just two, a name and a location she didn't recognize. And then he was talking to Carver in a low, rapid exchange that she couldn't fully track because her ears were doing something strange, pulling sound in and then pushing it back out like a tide, everything both too loud and too distant at once. Maya's green coat, Derek's hand on her arm. She picked up Luca's phone from the table, looked at the photo again, made herself look at it the way she'd made herself look at her own face in the camera that night in the laundromat, clinically inventorying, not feeling it yet. Maya's posture said frightened but ambulatory, not injured. The hand on her arm was controlling direction, not inflicting pain. Derek wanted leverage, not a body. Not yet. She set the phone down and turned around. "I'm coming with you," she said. Luca turned from the cluster of men. His face said no before he opened his mouth. "You're not," he said. "She's my sister, and she's there because of me. And I'm coming." "Ariana, you can argue with me or you can move." She picked up her jacket from the chair. "Pick one." He looked at her for 3 full seconds. She held it. Didn't move, didn't qualify, just held the line and waited for him to calculate the cost of the argument against the cost of the time. "You stay in the car," he said. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you see. You do not get out of that vehicle unless Carver opens your door." "Okay. I need you to mean that." "I mean it," she said, and she did, in the way you mean things when you're lying to someone you respect because the alternative is being left behind. They moved in 2 vehicles, the gray SUV with Carver and Ariana, and a second car she hadn't noticed in the parking structure until now. Dark blue, 4 doors, 2 men in it she'd never seen. They communicated in the clipped shorthand of people who had done this before, half of it over earpieces, half of it in the language of hand signals through car windows at red lights. Luca rode in the second car. She watched it through the SUV's windshield as Carver drove and processed what she knew. Derek had Maya. Derek had gotten to Maya before Voss had finished his job, which meant Derek hadn't waited for Voss to deliver a location. He'd used Voss's contact with Maya as the approach itself. Walk up to the sister, put a hand on her arm, and suddenly you don't need to find Ariana at all, because Ariana will come to you. It was smart. She hated that it was smart. She hated that she recognized it as the same intelligence that had made her believe for 8 months that she'd found someone worth believing in. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Bridgeport," Carver said. "Derek has a property there. Investment property, technically. It's been vacant for 7 months. How do you know that's where he took her?" "Because Voss just told us." She turned to look at Carver's profile. "Voss told you?" "Voss has reconsidered his professional loyalties in the last 40 minutes. Carver's voice was perfectly neutral. "He provided an address." She didn't ask what the reconsideration had involved. She looked out the windshield instead and watched the city moving around them, the southwest side giving way to Bridgeport, the neighborhood changing in texture, older 2-flats, corner stores, the specific density of a part of the city that had been working class for 100 years and intended to stay that way. Her phone buzzed. Derek. She looked at the screen. Carver glanced over. "Don't answer," he said. "I know." She watched it ring out. 30 seconds later, a text. "I just want to talk. Bring whoever you've been staying with. I think we all need to have an honest conversation. Maya's fine. She'll stay that way." She read it to Carver. He relayed it through his earpiece. She heard Luca's voice come back, tinny and distant through the speaker. "Tell her not to respond." He said, "I heard him," Ariana said. She put the phone face down on her knee. The SUV turned south and the street narrowed and the buildings on either side got older, the kind of old that was about accumulation rather than architecture. She watched a kid on a bicycle cut across an intersection without looking. Watched a man pull a rolling cart full of laundry along the sidewalk. Ordinary Wednesday evening in a neighborhood that didn't know it had a perimeter closing around one particular building on one particular block. Her hands were steady. She noticed that and didn't know what to make of it. The property was a two-story brick building that had been a small manufacturing concern at some point. The loading dock on the side had been bricked over, but not well. The newer brick a different shade from the original. Ground floor windows boarded. Second floor with glass still in the frames but painted over from the inside. A single exterior light above the main entrance, on, which meant someone had turned it on deliberately. A signal, or just Derek's idea of normalcy. She couldn't tell. Carver parked half a block away, engine off. The blue car had gone around the block. "Stay," Carver said, and got out. She watched him cross the street and meet Luca on the sidewalk. Watched them talk. Watched two of the other men fan out in opposite directions around the building's perimeter, moving with the practiced low profile of people who'd done building approaches before in circumstances she didn't want to think too carefully about. Her phone buzzed again. Not Derek this time. Maya. The text read, "Ari, I'm okay. He says he just wants to talk. Please, just come. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm so sorry." She stared at the message. Maya's thumbprints were all over the syntax, the run-on sentences, no punctuation until the apology, the specific cadence of her sister typing fast under stress. But it had come from Maya's phone, which Derek had, which meant Derek had composed it, or dictated it, or handed Maya the phone and told her what to type. Or Maya had typed it herself because she was scared and she believed it, believed that talking was what would happen, believed that her sister showing up would make this okay. That was the thing about Derek. He was very good at making people believe that talking was what would happen. She got out of the car. She was on the sidewalk before she'd fully processed the decision. The November air hitting her face, the street quiet around her. She heard Carver's voice sharp from across the street, "Ms. Vale." And then Luca turned and saw her, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded thing she'd seen from him in 6 days, something between fury and a fear he was immediately suppressing. He crossed the street in 8 strides. "Get back in the car," he said. Quiet. Controlled. The quiet that meant the same thing Derek's quiet meant, except for entirely different reasons, and she knew the difference, and it mattered. "He texted from Maya's phone," she said. He's going to keep texting. He's going to keep escalating until I show up, or until—" She stopped. "I'm the only reason Maya is in there. I'm the only currency he has that works on me." She held Luca's gaze. "You know I'm right. What I know doesn't matter right now. It's the only thing that matters." She looked at the building, the light above the entrance. "If your people go in there and Derek doesn't see me, what does he do?" The silence answered. "He's not rational anymore," she said. "You said it yourself. A man who knows a warrant is coming. He's not trying to negotiate. He's trying to make something happen that changes the math." She turned back to Luca. "The math changes if I'm not here to testify. That's all he's thinking about. So you walk in there and what? I buy your people time to get into position." She said it flatly, the way she'd said everything tonight that she hadn't let herself feel yet. "I go in. I talk to him. I keep him talking. You get Maya out." Luca looked at her for a long moment. She watched him work through it. Not the emotional calculation, she understood he'd set that aside for now, but the tactical one. The angles. The timing. What his people could do from the outside while she held Derek's attention from the inside. "He has to believe you came alone," Luca said. "I know. You walk in carrying a phone he can verify has no recent outgoing calls. I know. And you keep him in one room." He reached into his jacket and produced a small device, an earpiece smaller than anything she'd seen before, flesh-toned. "Left ear. You'll hear me. Don't respond verbally." She took it, fitted into her ear. A faint static, and then Luca's voice, close and clear. "Can you hear me?" She nodded. He looked at her for one more second. Something moved across his face that she couldn't read in the dark, and the time pressure, something she filed away to examine later when later existed. I'll be 40 feet away the whole time, he said. I know, she said. She turned and walked toward the building. 8. The door wasn't locked. That was the first thing. The handle turned clean and the door swung in, and the darkness beyond it smelled like a building that had been closed for months. Stale air, concrete dust, the particular smell of spaces that have stopped being used. She stood in the threshold and let her eyes adjust. A corridor. Bare bulb in a fixture halfway down, casting a circle of yellow light. Stairs at the end going up. She walked in. Her footsteps echoed. She didn't try to silence them. Derek would hear her coming either way, and trying to be quiet would read as tactical, and she needed to read as frightened and compliant, which she was, one of those things, partially. Ari. His voice came from the top of the stairs. She stopped, looked up. He was standing on the landing, silhouetted against light from the room behind him. He looked the same. Of course he looked the same. It had been 6 days, not 6 years, and she'd somehow expected the last 6 days to have changed something visible about him. He was in dark pants and a gray Henley, and he was holding a phone in his hand loosely, at his side, and he looked like a man standing in his own hallway waiting for someone to come home. Hey, she said. The word came out even. She was surprised. I'm glad you came. He said it warmly. She recognized the warmth. It was the warmth he used when he'd already decided something and was in the stage of managing her around it. Come up. She climbed the stairs. In her left ear, Luca's voice barely above a whisper. East exterior window, second floor, Carver's 2 minutes out. She reached the landing. Derek stepped back to let her into the room. She walked past him, and her skin registered his proximity the way skin registers heat. An involuntary awareness, something below thought. The room was large, open plan. The second floor gutted to a single space. Concrete floor. 3 standing work lights flooding the space with harsh white. A folding table against one wall with 2 phones on it, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. And Maya, sitting in a folding chair near the far wall, wrists zip-tied in front of her, face pale and eyes red from crying, who looked up when Ariana came in and said, Ari, in a voice that cracked on the second syllable. She's fine, Derek said from behind her. I told her she was fine. Ariana looked at Maya. Maya was physically okay. No visible injury, just frightened and humiliated and so sorry that the sorry was coming off her like heat. Ariana made herself hold Maya's gaze for exactly 2 seconds and put into that look everything she needed to communicate without words. I see you. You're okay. Don't move. Then she turned to Derek. He was standing with his arms loose at his sides, the phone still in his right hand. He looked tired. Not the tired of someone who hadn't slept, the tired of someone who had made a series of decisions that each required the next one, a chain of choices that had deposited him here in this empty building on a Wednesday evening with zip ties and work lights, and a woman zip-tied to a chair, and an FBI warrant processing somewhere across the city. You look better, he said, looking at her face, at the bruising that had faded from purple to yellow-green over 4 days. Derek. I didn't want it to get to this. He moved to the folding table, set the phone down, picked up the cold coffee and looked at it and put it back down. I want you to understand that. I didn't make any of these choices. You put your hands on me, she said. You put zip ties on my sister. Because you disappeared. Because you went to... He stopped, pressed his mouth together. The anger was right there behind the controlled surface. She could feel it the way you feel a change in pressure before weather. Who is he, Ari? Who have you been with for the last 6 days? Nobody. Don't. The word came out hard and flat. I have people. I have someone who has been very helpful. I know you've been with someone. I know he has resources. I know he's been interfering with my... He stopped again. His jaw worked. I had a life. I had a career. I had a reputation in this city, and all of it is being systematically... He picked up one of the phones on the table, turned it to face her. An email thread, federal letterhead at the top. Do you see this? Do you understand what this is? The warrant. He'd seen the warrant. That's not my fault, she said. You sent them documents from my laptop. I didn't. Someone did. Someone who had access to my apartment, who had access to my files. He set the phone down hard enough that it skittered on the table. Ariana, I need a name. That's all. Give me a name and we can talk about the rest of this like adults. In her ear, Luca's voice. East window is open. 30 seconds. She held Derek's gaze. There's no name to give you, she said. I left. That's all. I left and I found somewhere to stay, and whatever happened to your accounts and your files happened because you had vulnerabilities and someone found them. She took one step toward him, deliberate, controlled. Derek, this is already over. Whatever you think is going to happen in this room tonight, it's already over. Something changed in his face. She'd pushed too hard. She could see it the instant it happened. She'd given him the version of her he wasn't expecting, the one that wasn't frightened enough, and something behind his eyes recalibrated from management to something raw and faster. Over, he said, very quietly. Derek, he moved fast for a man who'd been still. Not toward her, toward Maya. He was around the folding table and had his hand in Maya's collar, hauling her up from the chair before Ariana had completed the step forward she'd already started, and Maya made a sound, short, sharp, involuntary, that did something to Ariana's vision, a kind of narrowing at the edges. Tell me his name, Derek said. He had Maya's collar twisted in his fist, Maya up on her feet and off balance, zip-tied wrists out in front of her. His voice had gone somewhere beyond the controlled register now. Or I swear to you, let her go. A name, Ariana. You want a name? She held very still. The work lights were brutal and white, and the shadows they cast were hard-edged, and she could feel the earpiece in her left ear and Luca's silence in it, which meant he was hearing this and making decisions, which meant the east window was either open or being opened, and she needed 20 more seconds. My name. That's the only name you need. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who took the photos. I'm the one who is going to sit down with federal investigators and give them 8 months of documentation about what you did to me. Her voice was even. She made it even the way you make a fist, deliberately, with effort, with the specific intention not to shake. Let Maya go, and this conversation is between you and me, the way it should have been from the beginning. Derek looked at her. The fury in his face was doing something complicated, working against the calculation, the two things fighting each other across his features in a way she could read because she had spent 2 years learning to read it. You think I won't, he started. The east window came in. Not loudly. That was the thing. She'd expected noise, the crash of breaking glass, something cinematic. Instead, there was a single sharp sound, almost mechanical, and then Carver was in the room with 2 other men behind him, fast and low. And Derek turned toward the sound with his hand still in Maya's collar, and in the half-second of his distraction, Ariana crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and grabbed Maya's arm. Don't! Derek's hand tightened. Let go, Ariana said, and her voice had nothing left in it. No management, no strategy, just the raw declarative of someone at the absolute end of performance. He didn't let go. What happened next was fast and disorganized in the way real physical confrontations are. Nothing like the clean geometry of a film fight. Carver reaching Derek from the left, Derek releasing Maya to turn, Maya stumbling into Ariana's arms, both of them going sideways into the wall, the impact knocking the breath from Ariana's lungs, Maya's tied wrists catching her chin on the way down and splitting the same corner of her lip that had only just healed. She tasted blood, held her sister. Felt Maya shaking against her, the specific full-body tremor of someone whose adrenaline had finally found an exit. I've got you, Ariana said, into Maya's hair. I've got you. Across the room, Derek was not cooperating. He'd gotten a forearm across Carver's throat, or tried to, and one of the other men had him by the left arm, and there was a struggle happening that was ugly in close quarters, and she could hear Derek's breathing from 12 feet away, ragged and furious. The sound of a man who had nothing left to lose and had decided that meant he could do anything. Ariana, Luca's voice in her ear. East stairs, now. Take your sister and go down the east stairs. She looked up, found the east wall. A door, slightly ajar. A darker shadow beyond it. She got Maya upright. Maya was trying to help, legs working, wrists still tied but moving with her. They went for the door. Ari! Derek's voice from across the room, from inside whatever was happening with Carver and the others. She didn't look back. Ari, don't you? She pushed through the door. The stairwell beyond was dark and cold, and they went down it by feel, one hand on the rail, Maya against her side, and she heard behind them through the door the sounds of a struggle that was resolving itself in ways she chose not to inventory. At the bottom, a door, and through it an alley, and the night air hit her face like cold water. Luca was there. Not inside with Carver. Out here, in the alley, which meant he'd never gone through the window with the others, which meant he'd positioned himself here specifically, at this exit point, because he'd known she'd come out here, or because he'd positioned himself to be wherever she ended up, and she didn't know which, and in this specific moment, it didn't matter. He looked at her face, the blood on her lip. His expression did something brief and severe. She needs the zip ties cut, Ariana said. He produced a blade from his jacket pocket, small, practical, and cut through Maya's wrists in 2 seconds. Maya brought her hands to her chest and pressed them together and started crying, properly, the way she'd been holding back since the room, big ragged sobs that she buried in Ariana's shoulder. Ariana held her. Over Maya's shoulder, she could see the building's second-floor windows, the work light still burning white and harsh inside, shadows moving. The sounds from above had changed register, less struggle, something more deliberate. Is Carver okay? She asked. Carver's fine, Luca said. And Derek? Luca looked at her. Derek, he said carefully, has become aware that the men in that room are not going to hurt him. He paused. He's also become aware that there are federal agents 1 block east who received an anonymous call about a kidnapping at this address 11 minutes ago. She looked at him. You called them, she said. Someone called them, he said. When? Before we left the building. He held her gaze. Before any of this. Because you were right. It needed to end with him in custody, not in a room with my people. She thought about that, about what it meant that he'd called federal agents to an address where his own people were running an operation. The exposure in that, the deliberate choice to make himself and his organization visible to federal law enforcement in a way that couldn't be walked back. That's going to complicate things for you, she said. Yes, he said. Why did you do it? He looked at her for a moment. Maya's crying had subsided to shuddering breaths. The alley was cold, and the work lights burned in the windows above them. And somewhere 1 block east, a situation was deploying that would generate a federal arrest report that included this address and the events of this evening. Because you asked me what I get out of this, he said. And I told you I get to be someone who was there when it mattered. He paused. Being there when it matters sometimes means making it the kind of thing that holds up afterward. She heard it. The sirens, still distant, moving this direction with the specific cadence of vehicles that had an address and were going to it. 1 block east, closing. Above them, through the second-floor window, Derek Sloan's voice, high and cracking. You have no right. You have no legal. I want my lawyer. I want Mitch Farrow. I want... And then other voices. Carver's. And beneath Carver's, another voice she didn't recognize saying words she did. Federal agents, hands where I can see them, do not move. And she understood that the agents who'd come through the east entrance hadn't waited for the street units, and she understood that Luca had coordinated this down to the staging and the timing, and she stood in the alley holding her sister and tasted blood on her lip and felt the ground under her feet for the first time in 6 days, like something she could trust. Derek's voice again, above them. This isn't... You don't understand what she is. You don't understand who she's been with. I have a lawyer. I have rights. And then quiet. The specific quality of quiet that follows when someone stops having options. Maya lifted her head from Ariana's shoulder. Her face was wrecked. Mascara, tear tracks. The pale exhaustion of someone who'd been frightened for hours. She looked at Luca, then back at Ariana. Who is he? She said. Her voice was rough. Ariana looked at Luca. He looked back at her. He's someone who got a message that wasn't meant for him, Ariana said. Maya looked between them. Then she put her head back on Ariana's shoulder and closed her eyes, and Ariana felt her breathe. One breath, two, the rhythm of someone deciding to. The sirens arrived one block east, and then turned, and then were on the street in front of the building, the red and blue light reaching into the alley in strobes, painting the brick walls and Luca's face and Maya's wet cheeks in alternating color. Ariana stood with her arms around her sister and watched the light move and listened to the sound of the situation resolving itself on the other side of the building, voices multiplying, the radio crackle of federal procedure deploying at volume. Carver appeared at the alley entrance. He looked at Luca, a look that carried a full briefing in 3 seconds. "Sloan is in custody," he said. "Ground floor, 2 agents with him." He paused. "He's talking." "He'll stop talking when Farrow gets there," Luca said. "Farrow's already been called, ETA 20 minutes. "Then we have 20 minutes. Ariana looked up. "20 minutes for what?" Luca turned to her. The strobing light made him look older for a moment, or maybe that was just the night and everything in it. "There's a federal agent named Reyes. She's been the lead on Derek's financial case for 6 weeks. She's the one I've been coordinating with, carefully, at a distance, since the documents went over." He paused. "She needs to talk to you tonight, before Farrow arrives and shuts everything down." "Tonight?" "Now, ideally." Maya lifted her head again. She'd gotten her breathing under control. The trembling subsided to a fine vibration that Ariana could feel through the arms still around her shoulders. She looked at Luca with the specific assessment of an older sister who has just been zip-tied to a chair on account of this man's involvement in her younger sister's life. And whatever she was calculating behind her red-rimmed eyes, she kept to herself. "Can my sister come?" Ariana asked. "Yes," Luca said, without hesitation, which told her he'd already accounted for Maya being present. She looked at her sister. Maya gave a single nod, small, exhausted, decisive. The nod of someone who had made peace with being in over their head and chosen to stay in it anyway. "Okay," Ariana said. "Let's go." Agent Dana Reyes was 41 years old, lean and dark-haired, and she had the particular quality of someone who had learned to conduct conversations in imperfect conditions. Parking lots, hospital waiting rooms, folding chairs in empty warehouses, without letting the conditions bleed into the conversation itself. She met them in the back of an unmarked federal vehicle parked on the cross street, engine running for the heat, and she looked at Ariana's face. The split lip, the fading bruise, the specific texture of someone who had been through several things in quick succession, and said, "I'm sorry, we didn't move faster on this." Ariana sat across from her in the vehicle's rear compartment, Maya beside her, and thought about what to do with an apology from a federal agent. "You moved when you had enough," she said. "I understand how that works." Reyes looked at her for a moment, a reassessment happening behind her eyes. "Mr. Moretti indicated you'd be direct." Mr. Moretti indicated a lot of things about a lot of situations this week. Something shifted at the corner of Reyes's mouth. Not quite a smile. "I need to ask you some questions before Sloan's attorney arrives and the window closes. I want to be upfront with you. Anything you say tonight is voluntary. You're not under any obligation, and I'd strongly encourage you to have your own legal representation before making a formal statement." "I don't have a lawyer," Ariana said. "I have $83 and a hotel room I've been staying in on someone else's tab." "We can arrange. Ask your questions," Ariana said. "I'll tell you what I know. We can talk about lawyers tomorrow." Reyes looked at her for another moment. Then she opened the folder on her knee. The questions took 40 minutes. They were specific and sequential, and Reyes asked them without the sympathy performance that Ariana had braced for. "No, I can't imagine how hard this has been, or you're so brave." Just the questions, clean and direct, and Ariana answered them the same way. The first incident, the dates she could fix to specific events, the monitoring software on the laptop, the photographs, the text messages, the 14 messages in a row that she'd always called back to stop, the specific geography of fear that had kept her in an apartment with a man who hurt her for 14 months after the first time he'd hurt her. Maya sat beside her and didn't speak except once, when Reyes asked about the contact between Derek and Maya, and Maya answered that part herself, her voice steady in a way that cost her, describing the phone call on Thursday, what Derek had said, The picture he'd painted of a sister who'd been manipulated by someone dangerous, and how she had believed him, and how she had met with Voss because she thought she was helping. When Maya finished, the vehicle was very quiet. "You didn't know," Reyes said to Maya. "Factual. Not absolution, just fact." "No," Maya said. "I didn't." A pause. "I should have." "He's been doing this for 2 years," Reyes said, "manipulating the people around Ariana as a control mechanism. You're not the first person he worked that way, and you had incomplete information." She made a note. "Your contact with Voss is documented, and it corroborates Sloane's coordination with a known private investigator for purposes of locating a potential witness. That's useful." Maya looked like she didn't know what to do with being useful in this particular context. Ariana reached over and took her hand. Maya's fingers closed around hers immediately, tight, the grip of someone holding on. Reyes closed the folder. "The financial case was strong before tonight," she said. "What happened in that building? The kidnapping charge? The obstruction? That changes the calculus significantly. Sloane's attorney is going to try to negotiate. I want you to know that any negotiation will require your input, and nothing gets agreed to without your sign-off on the components that involve you directly." "What does that mean in practice?" Ariana asked. "It means he doesn't walk away from what he did to you in exchange for cooperation on the financial charges. Those are separate tracks, and they stay separate." Reyes held her gaze. "You have more power in this than you probably feel like you do right now." Ariana thought about the laundromat bathroom, the fluorescent light that couldn't decide whether to stay on, the mirror and the face in it, and the 4 photographs taken with hands that were steady because they'd gone past shaking. "Okay," she said. "One more thing." Reyes paused. The pause had a shape to it, the shape of a question she was choosing how to ask. "Mr. Moretti, his involvement in this situation, the hotel, the security arrangements, the documents that came to us anonymously. I'm not going to ask you to characterize the nature of that assistance or the methods involved." She looked at Ariana steadily. "What I'm going to tell you is that Mr. Moretti called this office 6 days ago when he received your initial message, before he made any other arrangements, before the hotel, before any of the other things. He called us first." Ariana went still. "He gave us a name and a preliminary account and indicated he intended to provide assistance to a potential victim of domestic abuse and asked, informally, what the legal parameters of that assistance should be." Reyes watched her face. "I tell you this not to advocate for him or his history, which is complicated and documented and not something I'm in a position to minimize. I tell you because you deserve to know the full sequence of events in a situation that involved you." The vehicle's heater ran. Somewhere outside, the radio crackle of the scene wrapping up on the street. Derek Sloan being walked to a federal vehicle in handcuffs, Mitch Farrow's black town car probably turning onto the block right now, 20 minutes on the dot. She'd trusted him. She'd built the trust incrementally over 6 days, tested it and found it, and then had it shaken by Garrett's leak and rebuilt it anyway, because the alternative was trusting nobody, and she'd been doing that for 2 years, and she knew what it cost. But she hadn't known this part. Hadn't known that the first thing he'd done, before the hotel and the car and the $300 in 20s, was call the federal agent running the case and ask where the legal lines were. She thought about what he'd said in the alley. Being there when it matters sometimes means making it the kind of thing that holds up afterward. She thought about that for a long moment. Then she got out of the federal vehicle and went to find him. He was standing at the end of the block, away from the scene, hands in his jacket pockets and his breath visible in the cold air. He heard her coming and turned and looked at her face and waited. "Reyes told me," she said. "I thought she might." "You called them first, before anything else." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me that?" He considered the question with the same seriousness he gave everything. "Because if I'd told you on day 1 that I'd already been in contact with federal agents, you'd have had one more reason not to trust me." He paused. "I thought it was more important for you to see the actions than to be told about them." She looked at him. At this man she'd known for 6 days who had built something she hadn't asked for and hadn't wanted, and had turned out to be the thing that held when everything else proved unreliable. She thought about Elena, the sister he didn't talk about much, The 24-year-old whose story had ended the way it had ended while Luca had resources and people and still somehow not enough of the right thing at the right moment. She thought about what it does to a person, to carry that for decades, to build an empire and dismantle it and try to become something different and still have the ghost of a failure like that living in the walls of everything. "Your sister," she said. "Elena. How did she die?" He was quiet for a moment. The question hadn't surprised him. She could tell that. He'd been waiting for it since the first time he'd mentioned the name. "She didn't," he said. Ariana waited. "She's in Portland. She has a restaurant. She has 2 kids." He looked out at the street, the red and blue light still moving at the far end. "She survived. She got out. She did it herself, mostly, and I helped with what I could when she let me." He paused. "But for 8 months before she got out, I knew something was wrong, and I made excuses for why I didn't push harder. I told myself she was an adult. I told myself she knew her situation better than I did." He turned back. "I wasn't wrong about either of those things. I was wrong about whether they were a reason to do nothing." "So you've been carrying a failure that isn't really a failure," Ariana said. "It felt like one," he said. "The 8 months felt like one." She thought about that, about the distance between what actually happens and what it feels like. She'd spent 2 years in a version of that gap, the distance between what she knew about herself and what she'd done, between the person she understood herself to be and the person who kept going back. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "I'm going to make the formal statement, full documentation. Everything Reyes asked for, on record, with a lawyer present." She held his gaze. "That statement is going to include the last 6 days. I'm not going to omit you." "I know," he said. "That means, I know what it means," he said. "I told you. That's my concern, not yours. It's going to be complicated for you." "I've been complicated before." "Luca." She waited until he was fully looking at her. "I'm not going to protect you by leaving you out. I'm not going to shape the story to keep your name clean. I'm going to tell the truth about all of it. What you did, how you did it, the parts that were in gray areas and the part where you called Reyes first, and the part where Carver went into my apartment, and the part where Garrett happened." She paused. "The truth is the only thing I have right now that's completely mine. I'm not going to edit it for anyone." He looked at her for a long moment. "I wouldn't ask you to," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you." The red and blue light at the end of the block went out. The scene was wrapping. She heard a car door, voices diminishing, the specific sound of a street returning to itself. Somewhere in a federal vehicle, Derek Sloan was being transported to a processing facility with his wrist cuffed and Mitch Farrow's number ringing unanswered because Mitch Farrow was stuck in Michigan Avenue traffic, and the world did not pause for inconvenient timing. She stood at the end of the block with Luca Moretti and breathed cold air, and felt the night settling around her into something that wasn't resolution. Not yet. Resolution would take months, would take a courtroom and a lawyer and documents, and the specific grinding endurance of legal process, but something that was the absence of immediate threat, which was, she was finding, its own kind of enormous. So the weeks that followed were not clean. Nothing about the aftermath of 2 years of damage is clean, and she'd understood that intellectually, but understanding it intellectually and living it were different things in the way that reading about cold and standing in it are different things. There were depositions and there were meetings with the attorney. The Federal Victims Advocate Program connected her to a sharp-tongued woman named Gail Ostrowski, who wore her reading glasses on top of her head and had been doing this for 20 years, and who looked at Ariana's documentation and said, without preamble, "This is a good case. It's going to take a while. Don't let anyone rush you through feeling whatever you need to feel about that." Ariana liked Gail Ostrowski immediately. Derek's attorney entered negotiations 3 weeks after the arrest. The financial charges and the kidnapping charge and the obstruction charge and the domestic abuse documentation created a weight that even Mitch Farrow's $400 an hour expertise couldn't fully offset. The negotiation took 6 weeks and resulted in a plea arrangement that Gail walked Ariana through in careful detail. Federal financial fraud charges with a 5-year sentence, the kidnapping charge as a concurrent felony, a civil restraining order with federal teeth. Ariana sat in Gail's office on the 14th floor of a Michigan Avenue building and read the document twice and signed it with a pen that had a law firm's name printed on the side. She didn't feel triumphant. She hadn't expected to. She felt tired in the specific deep way of someone who has been holding their breath for a long time and has finally been told they can stop. "Is it enough?" Maya asked in the car afterward. "It's what there is," Ariana said. Maya reached over from the driver's seat and took her hand, left it there for the rest of the drive without saying anything else, which was exactly right. Which was the thing about Maya that had always been exactly right, even when Maya got other things wrong. They'd had the conversation about Voss 2 weeks after the building. Not a fight. Something harder than a fight. Quieter. The kind of conversation that leaves bruises you don't see right away. Maya had cried through most of it, and Ariana had not, which was a reversal of their usual dynamic. And when it was over, they'd sat on Maya's kitchen floor drinking tea, with Maya's 4-year-old asleep down the hall. And the silence between them had been the silence of people who have said what needed to be said and are now deciding what comes after. What came after was them. Still. Which was what Ariana had needed to know. Luca's situation was, as she'd predicted, complicated. The formal statement she gave, complete, unedited, the truth about all 6 days, created a thread that federal investigators followed with the careful attention of people who had been watching Luca Moretti for years and had never managed to hold anything that stuck. What they found when they pulled on it was not what they expected. They found a man who had, over 3 years, been methodically dismantling the criminal infrastructure of his own organization, moving money into legitimate holdings, cutting relationships with people who operated outside the new parameters he'd set, replacing structure with structure, illegal with legal, the old architecture with something that could stand in daylight. The Garrett situation created the most friction. But Garrett himself, faced with his own cooperation interview, confirmed the sequence, that he'd been selling information independently, that Luca had not authorized or known about it, that when Luca discovered it, the response had been removal from the organization rather than anything that created additional federal liability. Carver's entry into her apartment was documented and acknowledged and created a charge that Luca's attorney negotiated down to a civil matter that cost money and left a record. The documents transferred to federal financial crimes were examined for chain of custody and determined to be admissible under circumstances that Ariana did not fully understand but that Gail Ostrowski reviewed and confirmed were not going to blow the case. In the end, and the end took 4 months, Luca Moretti was not charged with anything. The investigation produced a comprehensive record of an organization in the process of becoming legitimate, which was not the record anyone had expected to find, and the federal investigators closed their file with the kind of reluctant thoroughness of people who had been looking for something and found something else. He called her when it was over. Not a text. An actual call, which she'd come to understand was his way of marking things that mattered. "It's done," he said. "I know, Gail told me. How are you?" She was standing in the middle of a commercial space on the north side near the lake. Empty. Good light through the south-facing windows. The smell of old wood floors and the particular kind of potential that empty rooms have before anything's been decided about them. "I'm looking at a space," she said. A pause. "What kind of space?" "The kind that used to be a restaurant. Good bones. Wrong neighborhood, some people would say, but I think they're wrong about the neighborhood." She turned slowly, looking at the ceiling, the windows, the back wall where shelves could go. "The rent is almost manageable if I'm careful, and I get a small business loan, and I don't eat anything that costs money for about 18 months. Another pause. She could feel him smiling, which was a strange thing to be able to feel through a phone with a man you'd known for 4 months. "A bookstore," he said. "A bookstore," she said. "Overlooking the lake?" She looked at the south windows, the sliver of blue-gray water visible between the buildings on the next block. "Adjacent to overlooking the lake," she said. "Lake adjacent." "That's not the same." "It's close enough." She heard him exhale. Not a laugh. Something quieter. Something that had actual warmth in it rather than the careful management of warmth she'd watched him perform in the early days. "Ariana," he said. "Yeah. I'd like to see you." She stood in the empty room with the good light coming through the south windows and thought about the last 4 months. The depositions. Gail's 14th floor office. Maya's kitchen floor. The nightmares that came twice a week, and then once a week, and now occasionally. A receding frequency that her therapist, a matter-of-fact woman named Dr. Cho, who billed on a sliding scale and did not let her get away with anything, said was a normal part of the timeline. She thought about the version of herself in the laundromat bathroom, hands steady, camera held level, 4 photographs of her own damage taken with the particular determination of someone who has decided that documentation is the only power they have left. She thought about He Won't Touch You Again and what it had cost to become true, and what the truth had cost him, and what it had cost her, and how the accounting of it was never going to be simple or clean or finished. She thought about empty rooms with good light and the smell of old wood and what you decide to put in spaces when you finally get to decide. Okay, she said. The bookstore opened on a Thursday in March. She'd spent 4 months on it, the work filling the space that the legal process had vacated. She'd painted the back wall herself, badly at first and then better, learning the rhythm of it. She'd sourced the shelving from 3 estate sales in a school that was replacing their library furniture, mixing heights and woods in a way that looked intentional once it was done. She'd bought the front counter second-hand from a bakery that was closing and refinished it herself on Maya's back patio over 2 weekends in February while Maya's daughter toddled around their feet. She'd curated the inventory with the same instinct she'd been developing for 4 years behind someone else's counter. The sense of what a room should feel like when you walked in, what the balance was between the familiar and the surprising, how to arrange things so that people found books they didn't know they were looking for. The sign above the door was simple, black letters on a cream background. Vale Books. The morning of opening, she stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a long time. Inside, Maya was arranging the front table display for the 3rd time, dissatisfied with the previous 2 arrangements. Dr. Cho had told her that dissatisfaction with small decisions was a normal response to having survived large ones. And Ariana relayed this to Maya, and Maya said that was very interesting and continued rearranging the books. Gail Ostrowski sent flowers, which arrived at 9 a.m. and were yellow, which Ariana hadn't known she'd wanted until she saw them. She opened the door at 10. The first hour was friends and the curious and people who'd seen the sign go up over the past weeks. Small talk, which she'd never been good at and had gotten better at by necessity. Coffee and paper cups from the place 2 doors down. The particular atmosphere of a new thing finding its footing. At 11:40, the bell above the door sounded, and she was behind the counter entering inventory into the system, and she looked up. Luca was in the doorway. No Carver. No sedan at the curb. A gray coat she hadn't seen before, his hair slightly disordered from the wind off the lake 2 blocks over. He looked at the room, the shelves, the light, the flowers from Gail still on the front counter, with an expression that was not guarded for once, just taking it in. Then he looked at her. She came around the counter. They stood in the middle of the bookstore with morning light coming through the south windows, and the sounds of the street outside, and the particular quiet of a room full of books, which is a specific quality of quiet, hushed and expectant, the quiet of all those unread stories waiting. "It's good," he said, looking at the room and meaning more than the room. "Yeah," she said, "it is." She looked at him, at the lines of his face that she'd learned over 4 months of phone calls and 2 dinners and 1 afternoon walk along the lakefront where they'd talked about everything except the things that had brought them here, circling the center of it slowly, both of them aware of the circling. He wasn't an easy man, and she wasn't an uncomplicated woman, and what had happened between them was not the kind of origin story that simplified itself with time. But she was 33 days from the anniversary of a night in a laundromat bathroom, and she was standing in a room she'd built, and the man in front of her had answered a message not meant for him and made a call to a federal agent before he'd done anything else, and carried a guilt about a sister who was alive in Portland making pasta for her kids. And none of it was clean or simple or the version of things she would have chosen. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down at it, then up at her. "Do you want to see the back?" she said. "I put a reading chair back there. Good lamp. It's the best spot in the place." "I'd like that," he said. They walked through the bookstore together, past the shelves she'd sourced from estate sales, past the front table where Maya had finally achieved an arrangement she could live with, past the yellow flowers from Gale and the morning light from the south windows, and all the books waiting in their quiet rows. And outside through the glass, the city moved in its ordinary Thursday way, indifferent and enormous, and completely unconcerned with the fact that two people who had found each other through a wrong number on a storm-soaked night were walking through a room that smelled like wood and paper toward a reading chair with a good lamp, holding hands. The doorbell sounded once more above a new customer coming in. Ariana didn't look back. She'd stopped waiting for the next bad thing with the same automatic vigilance that had kept her alive for 2 years, and the stopping had been gradual, incremental, a degree at a time, and it wasn't finished, and it wouldn't be finished for a long time. Dr. Cho said that was okay. That finished wasn't the goal. That the goal was a life you kept choosing, even after you knew what choosing cost. She kept choosing. Outside, sunlight broke through the March overcast and moved across the lake 2 blocks over and lit the water the specific color it turned in that particular angle of early spring light. Not blue and not gray, but something between the two. Something that didn't have a clean name, and the city went about its Thursday, and the bookstore held its quiet, and the story that had started with a wrong number and a photograph of damage ended here, in the ordinary, extraordinary fact of a woman in a room she'd built, still standing, still choosing, with her hand in someone else's and the door open behind her. This is a work of fiction created entirely for artistic and entertainment purposes. All characters, organizations, events, and locations are wholly fictional and bear no relation to any real person, group, or event.